Discover the extraordinary, untold story of two men who reshaped Pakistan's destiny through pure service and unshakable integrity. Hakeem Mohammed Saeed transformed Hamdard into a global movement of healing, education, and child development. Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi built SIUT into one of the world's finest models of free, dignified, world-class healthcare, open to every human being regardless of wealth. Chapter 1. Choose a vision bigger than yourself. A great life does not begin with resources, connections, or luck. It begins with vision. A vision so large, so demanding, so unforgiving, that it forces you to grow beyond who you are today. And this is exactly where both Hakeem Mohammed Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi began, not with comfort, not with convenience, but with a mission that swallowed their personal lives and transformed millions of others. Because here's the truth: if your vision only serves you, it dies with you. If it serves humanity, it outlives you. This is strategy. This is architecture. This is how legacies are built. Hakeem Saeed did not wake up one morning and say, "Let me open a small clinic." No, he declared, through his actions more than his words, "Let me revive an entire civilizational system of healing." That was his real ambition. Not a building, not a business, a civilizational revival. And this is the difference between a small life and a monumental one. It's easy to say you want to help people, but harder to design a vision that demands your entire existence. It's harder to commit to something that is bigger than your fears, bigger than your ego, and bigger than your lifetime. Hakeem Saeed didn't build Hamdard Dawakhana just to sell herbal products. He built it to preserve, modernize, and globalize the Unanatib tradition, a system of healing stretching back 1,000 years. The Dawakhana was only the first expression of the vision. The factories, the laboratories, the research centers, these were steps in a much larger mission, to restore dignity to Eastern medicine and prove its relevance in the modern world. And when he founded Hamdard University, he wasn't merely establishing another academic institution. He was building a sanctuary for learning rooted in Eastern wisdom while fully embracing the demands of contemporary science. As he often emphasized in his public talks, education is not just for earning, education is for building nations. Whether this was spoken as a line or lived as a principle, it carried the weight of truth. Because what he built was not a university, it was an ecosystem for national transformation. Just as Hakeem Saeed's vision demanded cultural revival, Dr. Adeeb Rizvi's vision demanded moral revolution. Dr. Rizvi did not set out to build a hospital. He set out to declare a principle. Healthcare is a human right, free, dignified, and equal for every person. Not because it sounds noble, but because he believed that dignity cannot be means-tested. It sounds idealistic, but in reality, it became the force that built SIUT, Sindh Institute of Urology and Transplantation, one of the world's largest charitable healthcare facilities. The more important issue is this: SIUT did not grow because of money, it grew because of mission. Money follows mission. Resources follow conviction. People follow vision. The real question is not how did he build SIUT. The real question is why did his vision demand that it exist. When SIUT started, it was a small urology ward, a single department, a humble unit. Nothing about it looked like the foundation of a global benchmark. But vision sees what walls cannot show. Vision sees the invisible. Vision pulls the impossible into reality. When asked why he never turned patients away, Dr. Rizvi famously responded, "We do not look at bank balances. We look at human faces." Whether those were his exact words or distillation of his message, the truth behind them shaped an entire institutional culture. Far from being a weakness, this uncompromising compassion became SIUT's strength. It attracted donors, volunteers, doctors, and patients who recognized something rare, a place where dignity is practiced, not preached. So the lesson for you is clear. A vision that serves only you will not survive you. A vision that serves humanity becomes immortal. Look at their lives. Hakeem Saeed built Hamdard Dawakhana, Hamdard Foundation, Hamdard University, and the beloved children's magazine Hamdard Nornhol. What started as a Dawakhana became a foundation. What started as a foundation became a university. What started as a university became a legacy that still transforms children, students, and communities decades after his passing. Dr. Rizvi built SIUT from one room into a multi-building, multi-specialty, internationally respected center offering dialysis, transplantation, oncology, radiology, emergency care, all without a price tag. Not free as charity, free as a principle, free as a right, free as justice. Free with dignity became the SIUT slogan, and it wasn't marketing. It was mission. The mistake many people make is believing vision is about having an idea. But vision is not an idea. Vision is a demand you place upon yourself. Vision is a standard you refuse to compromise. Vision is the discipline of saying, I will build something that will outlive me. Not only did Hakeem Saeed refuse to commercialize his work beyond what was necessary, he reinvested it into education and national development. Not because he wanted recognition, but because he believed institutions, not individuals, shape nations. Dr. Rizvi treated every patient with dignity. He designed a system that protects that dignity long after he leaves. Because what we need is not more heroes. What we need is more institutions built by heroes. So ask yourself right now, is your vision small enough to accomplish alone or big enough to require your entire life? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If your vision is comfortable, it's not vision. It's fantasy. If your vision doesn't scare you, stretch you, or confront you, it will never outlive you. If your vision dies with you, it was never a mission, it was an ego project. Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Rizvi teach the same lesson through different fields. Choose a vision so large that it forces you to become a new version of yourself. This chapter is not the end. It is the beginning of how you must think. Because if you fail here, at the level of vision, everything else collapses. If the foundation is small, the building can never be big. A vision bigger than yourself is not a luxury, it is a responsibility. And if you don't choose one, you risk living a life that disappears the moment you stop breathing. So let this be your standard from now on. If your vision only serves you, it dies with you. If it serves humanity, it outlives you. Chapter 2. Build institutions, not popularity. There is a golden rule in the story of every great nation builder. Build institutions, not popularity. Popularity is loud, but institutions are lasting. Popularity impresses crowds, but institutions transform generations. And this is the very line that separates the temporary achiever from the timeless reformer. Hakeem Mohammed Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi did not chase applause. They chased architecture. They built structures, not slogans. They engineered ecosystems, not headlines. Because here's the uncomfortable truth, popularity fades. Institutions remain. It's not easy to design a system that continues working when you are gone. It's harder to build a process that outlives your own presence. The real question is not how do I become recognized? The real question is how do I build something that can never collapse? Hakeem Saeed understood this from day one. He knew that a brand without a philosophy is just a product, and a product without a purpose is just noise. So he built Hamdard not as a business, but as a living institution rooted in scholarship, medicine, social service, and national development. Hamdard Dawakana was not the end, it was the beginning. He created laboratories, research centers, and quality control units long before it became fashionable. Not because he wanted commercial dominance, but because he wanted Unana medicine to be respected at the level of scientific rigor. He treated Hamdard as a trust, not a company. And this is the difference between self-serving ventures and civilization-serving institutions. Not only did he manufacture Eastern medicine, but he reinvested the revenue into education. Hamdard Nornhol, Hamdard University, Hamdard School System, and national scholarship programs. You might think he was diversifying, but in reality, he was institutionalizing a value system. He monetized products to fund ideas. He used business to finance nation building. He turned commerce into culture. This is what most people miss. It's not about profit. It's about purpose. Profit becomes sustainable only when it is anchored to a mission larger than itself. Otherwise, it collapses with the personality behind it. Now look at Dr. Adeeb Rizvi. His approach was radically different, yet equally powerful. If Saeed monopolized selectively to fund education, Rizvi refused profit entirely to protect dignity. When Dr. Rizvi founded SIUT, he refused to charge patients, not because he lacked options, but because he wanted to build a moral institution where dignity was a structural value, not a sentimental one. No patient should ever be turned away due to lack of resources, he said repeatedly in interviews. For him, free treatment wasn't charity, it was justice. It was a principle, not a marketing line. This principle became the foundation upon which one of the world's largest free transplantation and dialysis centers was built. SIUT grew because its mission was non-negotiable. Its values were unshakable. Its culture was unified around one idea. The patient comes first, and dignity comes with treatment. And this is the difference between an institution and a personality cult. Personality says, "Look at me." Institution says, "Look at the work." Personality says, "Follow me." Institution says, "Follow the mission." Personality dies. Institution endures. If we don't understand this difference, then we risk building lives that crumble the moment we step away. If we don't prioritize systems, then we create fragile achievements. And fragile achievements do not create legacy, they create dependency. Both men understood a deeper truth. The strongest institutions are built not on charisma, but on consistency. Saeed did not need to be present every hour at Hamdard University for it to function. He built governance mechanisms, academic councils, research policies, and leadership pipelines. He institutionalized excellence. He trained successors. He built frameworks that could survive politics, economics, and time. Just as he built systems in education, he also built rituals of social responsibility. Nornhall Assembly, Shuri Hamdard, literary festivals, national debates. These were not events. These were institutionalized dialogues, meant to shape a generation of thinkers. Now compare that with Dr. Rizvi's approach at SIUT. His greatest achievement was not the number of transplants or dialysis machines. It was the culture of equality. Zero VIP culture. Zero preferential treatment. A rich man and a laborer receive the same chair, the same file, the same bed, the same medicine. Not because it sounds idealistic, but because institutional dignity must be protected structurally, not emotionally. What we need is not more leaders who seek attention, but rather leaders who build processes that reduce dependency on themselves. What we need is not more temporary heroes, but long-lasting systems. Because when a system is built, the work continues even when the founder is gone. This is about more than medicine or education. It's about the architecture of legacy. No one can deny that charisma creates followers, but what's often overlooked is that institutions create progression. Institutions create stability. Institutions create continuity. And the more important issue is this. Institutions allow your values to outlive your voice. If you want to learn from Saeed and Rizvi, you must ask yourself, are you trying to be liked, or are you trying to build something? Are you chasing applause, or are you designing systems? Are you focused on attention, or are you focused on architecture? Because popularity is easy. Popularity is emotional. Popularity is temporary. But institutions require work. Institutions require discipline. Institutions require sacrifice. It's not that people lack ambition, it's that they lack follow-through. People don't lack ideas. They lack structure. And not passion. They lack process. So here's your instruction. Stop chasing personal validation and start building frameworks that continue without you. Build a system for your business. Build a schedule for your habits. Build a process for your goals. Build a structure for your values. Build something that functions on its own. Look at Hamdard today. Look at SIUT today. The founders are not physically present, yet the institutions continue. Why? Because they were built on systems, not sentiments. This is not the end of a lesson. It is the beginning. Because once you understand that popularity fades while institutions remain, you begin to think like a builder, not a performer. You begin to act like a founder, not a follower. You begin to create something that lives longer than your own lifespan. Chapter 3. Turn service into a discipline, not an emotion. Service feels noble. Service feels uplifting. Service feels moral. But feelings don't build nations. Feelings don't build hospitals. Feelings don't build universities, research centers, or affordable medicines. And that brings us to the central truth of this chapter. Service is not sentiment. Service is structure. It's about the discipline of helping whether you feel like it or not. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's required. You might think service is an attitude, but in reality, service is a schedule. You might assume service is compassion, but what's often overlooked is that service is consistency. Both Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Adeeb Rizvi understood this in ways that most people never do. And the evidence is right there in their daily routines. Hakeem Saeed's day began at dawn, every single day. He lived with a timetable that would intimidate even the most committed professionals. It wasn't about motivational speeches or emotional highs. It was about a daily, almost militaristic rhythm. And he stuck to it for decades. Dr. Adeeb Rizvi worked 16 to 18 hours a day for years on end. Whether you like it or not, that's the discipline required to treat thousands of patients, oversee surgeries, train young doctors, and run SIUT's completely free, zero VIP hospital model. It's harder to consistently show up long before sunrise, operate all day, and still stay available for emergencies past midnight. But that's the point. Service is not an emotion. It's an architecture of life. Just as an engineer designs a building with precise measurements, so too must a servant of humanity design their day with precise commitments. Service as consistent habit, not occasional heroics. The real question is not do you care. The real question is can you show up with excellence every day without fail? If we look at Hakeem Saeed's own routine, we observe that he personally handled thousands of letters from students, researchers, citizens, and even children who wrote to him after reading Hamdard Nornhul or Hamdard SIUT. Most leaders delegate or ignore communication. He turned correspondence into a civic discipline. He didn't feel like responding, he scheduled it. He didn't rely on the adrenaline of a good day. He relied on the discipline of a structured life. Similarly, Dr. Rizvi kept an open-door policy at SIUT long before the phrase became popular. The poorest patients didn't need references, political contacts, or influence. They needed dignity, and he provided that dignity by showing up every day, in person, in the wards, in the ICUs, in the transplant units. Not only did he maintain the practice, he institutionalized it. To him it was emotionally satisfying, it was morally required. This is the difference between ordinary service and transformative service. Ordinary service depends on mood. Transformative service depends on method. The hard truth: discipline outlasts emotion. Emotions fluctuate. Discipline endures. Emotions change with weather, personal issues, sleep, and discomfort. Discipline survives all of that. And if we don't understand this, we risk building lives governed by temporary feelings instead of stable principles. This is why Hakeem Saeed kept his mornings sacred. He believed the early hours were the foundation of productivity, reflection, and decision-making. Whether he was traveling, attending conferences, or conducting meetings, his dawn routine remained untouched. Far from being a rigid habit, it actually gave him freedom, the freedom to maintain clarity, purpose, and energy throughout the day. On the other hand, Dr. Rizvi's discipline was grounded in medical precision. He wasn't just a surgeon, he was an architect of systems. He designed SIUT's processes in a way that ensured every patient received the same standard of care, whether they were rich or poor. And this required relentless oversight. It's easy to admire SIUT's success. It's harder to internalize the daily grind behind it. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of your understanding of why service must be structured. Because without structure, your service will collapse under the weight of your own inconsistency. Service as a system of accountability. Look at the contrast. Hakeem Saeed built education and research-oriented institutions. Dr. Rizvi built a clinical, medical service-oriented institution. Different domains, same principle, structured service. No one can deny that both men were visionaries, but what's often overlooked is how they maintained self-accountability. Saeed held himself accountable through discipline. He wrote, lectured, administered, traveled, advised, and supervised, all on a fixed rhythm. Rizvi held himself accountable through presence. He refused to retreat into the comfort of an executive office. He stayed in the wards, in the operating rooms, in the teaching halls. The more important issue is not whether you want to serve, it's whether you're willing to structure your life to serve. This is about more than passion. It's about an internal governance system. It's not that they were more emotional than the rest of us, it's that they were more disciplined. Service as a practical routine. How you apply this. So, what does this mean for you? How do you turn service from a feeling into a lifestyle? Here are the real behavioral instructions. Build a schedule of service, not random acts of kindness. Choose a daily or weekly time where your contribution is mandatory, not optional. Create a feedback loop. Just as Saeed responded to letters, choose a mechanism, emails, community engagement, mentoring, that forces you to stay connected. Remove the emotional filter. Serve whether you feel energetic or tired, inspired or uninspired. That's discipline. Stay accessible. Adopt Dr. Rizvi's open-door mindset. Be available to those you lead or serve. Consistently track your service like a project. Service is work. Treat it with the seriousness of work, milestones, deadlines, results. Tie service to long-term outcomes. Emotion cares about the moment. Discipline cares about the legacy. Just as Saeed's letters built trust and credibility, and just as Rizvi's presence built SIUT's culture of dignity, so too can your structured service build long-term impact. Chapter 4. Let compassion guide every decision. Compassion is not softness. Compassion is not sentimentality. Compassion is not a momentary feeling. And here is the core truth of this chapter. Compassion is the strongest strategy. It's about moral clarity. Not about guilt, but about responsibility. Not only about empathy, but also about execution. Compassion does not weaken leadership, it strengthens it. What we need is not leaders who feel for people, but leaders who act for people. The real question is not, are you kind? The real question is, does your kindness scale into systems, institutions, and life-changing access? This is where both Hakeem Mohammed Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi stand as towering examples, two men who didn't let compassion remain an emotion. They turned it into policy. They turned it into design. They turned it into rules of operation. And their impact proves one thing again and again. Compassion is not weakness. Compassion is infrastructure. When compassion becomes structure, look at Hakeem Saeed's model. He didn't just believe in affordability, he engineered affordability. He ensured Hamdard products remained within reach of the poorest households. Whether it was Rue Afza, Safi, or the hundreds of herbal medicines produced under the Hamdard brand, he set a rule: profitability must never compromise accessibility, not because he wanted applause, but because he believed that health is a fundamental right, not a luxury. He took the profits from those products and invested them back into society. Hamdard University, Medinat al-Hikmah, Hamdard Public School, Hamdard Foundation Hospitals and Clinics, scholarships and research programs, children's education projects like Nornhol. It's easy to say you care about the next generation, but harder to build a magazine like Hamdard Nornhol and run it for decades to shape young minds. Harder to create scholarships for students you'll never meet. Harder to pour millions into universities instead of your own comfort. But this is the point. Compassion, when structured, becomes generational power. Now look at Dr. Adeeb Rizvi. He didn't talk about justice, he operationalized it. He didn't talk about equality, he institutionalized it. His founding principle for SIUT was simple, unbreakable, and revolutionary. No patient will die because they cannot pay. This was not poetry. This was a policy so firm, so uncompromising, that every budget, every expansion, every dialysis machine, every transplant protocol had to align with it. While others built hospitals as businesses, he built SIUT as a moral imperative. And the results are in front of the world. The largest free dialysis program in Pakistan. One of the largest public sector transplant programs in the region. pediatric dialysis units, dedicated oncology and urology departments, long-term rehabilitation and follow-up care. A culture where the richest and the poorest are treated exactly the same. Not because he wanted fame, but because he believed dignity is non-negotiable. Just as Saeed created educational ecosystems, so too did Rizvi create medical ecosystems, both built not on money, but on compassion codified into action. The strategic power of compassion. People often misunderstand compassion as a soft value. But here's the truth. Compassion is the highest form of strategic intelligence. Why? Because compassion creates trust. Trust creates loyalty. Loyalty builds communities. Communities sustain institutions. The more important issue is not how much you feel, but how much you are willing to design your life, your work, and your decisions around compassion. Far from being an emotional luxury, compassion is the most practical tool you have. It keeps decisions clean. It prevents corruption. It eliminates exploitation. It forces transparency. It demands fairness. You might think compassion slows progress, but in reality, it accelerates it. When people believe you care, they give more, they work harder, they sacrifice deeper. And both Saeed and Rizvi proved this. Their teams didn't follow them because of titles. Both men avoided titles. Their teams followed them because compassion created legitimacy. Whether you like it or not, compassion is what separates leaders from rulers. Contrasting models, identical principles. Let's look deeper at the contrast, because contrast reveals principles. Hakeem Saeed's compassion model, empower through education. He didn't focus only on medicines, he focused on minds. He created untold to give children imagination, ethics, and aspiration. He invested in teachers, libraries, and science laboratories. He launched scholarships not for publicity, but for national growth. He published low-cost books to democratize learning. His compassion said, "A nation cannot rise without educated children." Dr. Rizvi's compassion model, protect human dignity through healthcare. He built dialysis units where no patient had to ask, "How much will this cost?" He carried out transplants without billing the recipients. He created long-term rehabilitation systems because a transplant is not an event, it's a lifelong responsibility. He eliminated VIP culture because dignity is indivisible. His compassion said, "A human life cannot be ranked by wealth." Different arenas, different tools, same principle, compassion as strategy, not sentiment. How you build a compassion-first life. Now the question is, how do you apply all this? Here are the real behavioral instructions. Define a non-negotiable compassion principle. Just as SIUT says no one will be denied treatment, you must define a rule you are unwilling to break, build systems around your compassion. If you care about something, don't rely on your feelings. Design a process, put compassion before profit. Not because money is bad, but because money should serve purpose, not replace it, act before announcing. Saeed didn't advertise his compassion, he funded it. Rizvi didn't perform compassion, he operationalized it, focus on dignity. Every decision you make either elevates or erodes dignity. Choose elevation, ask the right question. How does this decision make life better for someone weaker than me? It's easy to say you are compassionate, but harder to make compassion the foundation of every decision you take. Yet that is exactly how legacies are built. Chapter 5. Turn obstacles into movements. Hardship is not a wall. Hardship is the doorway. This is not a motivational cliché. It is a strategic truth proven by the lives of Hakeem Mohammed Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi. Remember that obstacles do not stop progress. Obstacles amplify purpose if you approach them correctly. The real question is not, how do I avoid hardship? The real question is, how do I convert hardship into a catalyst for impact? For Saeed and Rizvi, obstacles were never interruptions. They were the raw material for institutions, influence, and transformation. Obstacles as accelerators. The Hakeem Saeed example. Consider Hakeem Saeed. He lived through political turbulence, business pressures, and the constant scrutiny of a society in flux. He navigated regulatory constraints while building Hamdard Dawakhana, expanding Hamdard University, and launching nationwide education initiatives. Not only did he manage the daily operational hurdles, but he also endured personal attacks, criticism from rivals, and finally, assassination in 1998. Far from ending his mission, these hardships galvanized the organizations he built. Look at the post-assassination trajectory of Hamdard Foundation. New educational programs were launched to honor his vision. Expanded healthcare initiatives continued under the rules he codified. Hamdard Dawakana grew into a global brand, exporting products across continents while funding research and social programs. It's easy to say, don't give up, but harder to structurally embed resilience in your organizations so that when a founder is removed, the mission not only survives but accelerates. Saeed achieved precisely that. Not because he was lucky, but because he planned for endurance. Not because he avoided challenges, but because he designed around them. Obstacles as inspiration. The Dr. Rizvi example. Now consider Dr. Adeeb Rizvi. His battle was less visible to the public, but no less grueling. For decades, he faced severe resource shortages, scarce equipment, insufficient staff, limited funding, bureaucratic skepticism. Government officials doubted a free hospital could survive social resistance. Some questioned why the poor should receive advanced treatments like kidney transplants. Yet Rizvi did not allow these challenges to define the boundaries of possibility. Instead, he used them as fuel for innovation. The SIUT single urology unit in Karachi expanded into multiple national centers, offering dialysis, cancer care, pediatric services, and transplants. Teams were trained to work efficiently under scarcity, turning constraints into processes. Public-private partnerships were carefully structured to maintain SIUT's uncompromising commitment. No patient denied care, no fee charged. Not because he wanted accolades, but because he knew that hardship, when met with persistence and strategy, forces clarity, discipline, and focus. The strategic lesson: hardship as a resource. Hardship is a resource, not a setback. The more important issue is not whether obstacles exist, but how you interpret and leverage them. Obstacles should not be romanticized. Obstacles should be operationalized. For both Saeed and Rizvi, every roadblock became a structural lesson. Hardship identifies weaknesses. Saeed learned which programs required more robust funding. Rizvi learned which hospital processes needed automation or redundancy. Hardship forces prioritization. Scarcity demands focus. Rizvi had to decide which procedures were critical and how to allocate time and resources efficiently. Saeed had to determine which schools or research centers could scale sustainably. Hardship builds legitimacy. A mission that thrives despite adversity earns trust. Communities rallied around SIUT precisely because Rizvi never compromised under pressure. Donors and students invested in Hamdard because Saeed turned challenge into credibility. Far from being random misfortune, obstacles become indicators and accelerators of strategic growth, turning your challenges into movements. Now, how do you personally harness hardship the way these two giants did? Here's a tactical approach. Reframe obstacles as opportunities. Each challenge is a test of structure, discipline, and vision. Ask, what system can I create to solve this problem permanently? Document and distribute the mission. Saeed left explicit operational principles in Hamdard. Rizvi codified SIUT protocols. If the founder falls, the system survives. Don't hoard knowledge or processes. Share them with your team. Accelerate rather than retreat. Opposition is not a signal to pause. Use it to refine your approach. Hardship exposes gaps. Address them methodically, and your organization grows stronger. Create scalable solutions. Don't fix every individual problem with temporary patches. Build systems, like Rizvi's national SIUT network or Saeed's educational expansion, that multiply your impact. Embed resilience in culture. Teach your team, setbacks are not failures, they are blueprints. Saeed's staff learned to work efficiently under scarcity. Rizvi's teams learned to innovate under bureaucratic resistance. Every obstacle became part of their identity. It's easy to see hardship as punitive, but harder to architect it as leverage. Yet that is precisely what differentiates leaders from ordinary operators. Contrasting approaches, common principles. Both men faced extreme challenges, but their approaches reveal a shared principle: Adversity must be transformed into mission momentum. Saeed, posthumous institutional expansion, continued scholarship programs, internationalization of Hamdard products Rizvi, single-unit hospital grows into a network of centers, training programs produce competent doctors nationwide. Different contexts, identical strategy, obstacles fuel structural progress, not fear or paralysis. Life will test you. What matters is whether your response produces resilient systems or temporary reactions. The closing lesson of Chapter 5. Hardship is not an end. It is the beginning of movement. Not because it is inevitable, but because your response is decisive. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Not because you deserve it, but because your mission does. Saeed and Rizvi show us. When you treat obstacles as doorways, not walls, you convert disruption into acceleration, scarcity into strategy, resistance into loyalty. If we fail to view adversity this way, then we risk building fragile visions. But if we embrace it, we create legacies that outlast both founders and critics. Chapter 6. Lead with integrity when no one is watching. Integrity is easy to praise, but notoriously hard to practice. It is far easier to speak about principles than to live them every day, under pressure, when no one is watching. Yet for leaders who leave lasting impact, integrity is not optional. It is the bedrock upon which every enduring institution rests. Hakeem Mohammed Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi demonstrate this truth with a consistency that is remarkable, almost unparalleled. Their lives are not simply stories of achievement. They are studies in moral architecture. The daily practice of integrity. Saeed's life was remarkably simple. His wardrobe rarely varied. Plain white clothes, practical shoes, minimal possessions. There were no ostentatious displays of wealth, no indulgence in status symbols. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he believed that personal simplicity sets the tone for organizational ethics. Rizvi lived the same principle in his professional life. At SIUT, there were no VIP lounges, no fast tracks, no preferential treatment for the wealthy or politically powerful. He personally ensured that no doctor or staff member compromised the hospital's ethical standards for money or influence. Luxury cars, private offices, and high salaries for the elite were refused, not as a statement, but as a rule embedded in daily operations. It's harder to enforce it systematically across an institution. Both men understood this distinction. Personal integrity breeds institutional integrity. Integrity as a cultural force. Not only did Saeed and Rizvi practice integrity in their personal lives, but they also used it as a structural lever to shape culture. At Hamdard, Saeed's transparency in financial reporting and personal accountability created an environment where employees and students understood that the mission transcended personal gain. Scholarships, research grants, and community programs were funded not just with money, but with trust in transparent processes. At SIUT, Rizvi refused to compromise standards even under political or financial pressure. This refusal was not symbolic, it was operational. Every patient received care according to a standard protocol, not according to who could influence or pay. Staff learned that ethical shortcuts were unacceptable, not because of fear, but because of a deeply embedded moral framework. The more important issue is this: when integrity is visible in daily action, it is contagious. Teams start to internalize standards. Compliance becomes voluntary because it aligns with identity rather than rules. Integrity under pressure. It's easy to claim honesty when life is comfortable. It's harder when the stakes are high. Saeed faced political upheavals, threats, and the eventual risk of assassination. Yet he never altered his lifestyle or his ethical commitments to appease power brokers or critics. He maintained transparent operations in Hamdard products, education initiatives, and research programs, even under scrutiny. Rizvi, in a context of scarcity and pressure, refused bribes, refused to compromise on patient care, and refused to give VIP privileges. He did not reward politicians, donors, or influential figures at the cost of institutional integrity. This is not just idealism, but in reality, it is strategic discipline. Integrity under pressure builds credibility, trust, and institutional longevity. Saeed's Hamdard Foundation remains a respected global brand decades after his death. SIUT is internationally recognized not only for medical excellence but for unwavering ethical standards. The mechanics of daily integrity. How do ordinary leaders practice this in real life? There are clear, actionable lessons. Consistency over visibility. Integrity is a habit, not a performance. Do the right thing when no one is watching, and repeat it every day. Lead by personal example. Saeed's simple lifestyle and Rizvi's refusal of VIP treatment were not just statements, they were signals. Leaders communicate more through actions than speeches, embed ethics into processes. Both men codified integrity, financial reporting, patient protocols, educational guidelines. All were designed so that deviations were difficult and detectable. Systems enforce values even when leaders absent refuse compromise for expediency. Short-term gains achieved through unethical means erode trust and damage legacy. Both Saeed and Rizvi refused these shortcuts, reinforce culture continuously, praise ethical behavior publicly, address breaches privately, and institutionalize feedback loops. Transparency must be visible and habitual. It's not that integrity is glamorous, it's that integrity is profitable in impact and sustainability. Saeed and Rizvi built institutions that outlasted their founders precisely because they prioritized ethical consistency over popularity, personal gain, or expedience. The long-term payoff of integrity, not because it is convenient, but because it is durable. Hamdard's scholarship programs, research grants, and healthcare initiatives thrive decades later because they were built on trust and transparency. SIUT's reputation attracts talent, donors, and international collaboration because the institution's ethical standards are non-negotiable. Integrity is not a moral luxury, it is a strategic multiplier. Every patient treated ethically, every employee held accountable, every financial transaction transparent, compounds trust. And trust compounds into influence, legacy, and scale. Integrity in your life and organization. Remember, you are being watched by your employees, by your peers, by your clients, by society. The paradox is, you lead most effectively when you act with integrity even when unobserved. Personal lifestyle choices communicate ethical priorities. Operational discipline communicates institutional priorities. Repetition reinforces culture and solidifies standards. Just as Saeed's white clothes silently taught humility, and Rizvi's refusal of VIP perks silently taught fairness, you too can set moral tone through small, consistent actions. Your values must be tangible and observable, even in mundane daily routines. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding the power of disciplined morality. Concluding thoughts. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching, and doing it again the next day. It is not a slogan, it is a strategic discipline. Saeed and Rizvi demonstrate that integrity is more than ethics. It is a lever for impact, credibility, and endurance. Without it, even the most brilliant vision falters. With it, even the most challenging mission becomes sustainable and influential. As we reflect on these lessons, remember, discipline, ethics, and consistent action are inseparable. Chapter 7. Make knowledge your power. Knowledge is not optional in leadership. Knowledge is not secondary to vision, influence, or strategy. Knowledge is power in its purest, most actionable form. Yet it is easy to misunderstand this. Many believe that knowledge is about credentials, or reading books, or collecting degrees. Not so. Knowledge, in the context of leadership and transformation, is applied, reinforced, and shared wisdom. Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi exemplify this truth. Both men understood that without knowledge, vision cannot endure, institutions cannot thrive, and service cannot scale. Learning as a daily discipline. Hakeem Saeed was prolific. He authored over 200 books on health, philosophy, and social reform. But writing alone was not the goal. His writings served a dual purpose: to educate and to inspire action. From medical journals to encyclopedias of Eastern medicine, he ensured that knowledge was structured, accessible, and transmittable. Saeed did not stop at writing. He founded Hamdard University, creating a permanent platform for research, education, and leadership development. Far from being an ivory tower academic, his university was a training ground for leaders who would carry forward his vision long after him. Rizvi, in parallel, was not content with conventional practice. He pioneered transplant and urology research in Pakistan, transforming SIUT into a hub of innovation. His knowledge was hands-on. Every surgical protocol, every training module, every research paper was directly tied to improving patient care. He established training programs recognized internationally, bridging the gap between Pakistan and global medical standards. The more important issue here is discipline. Knowledge is not a hobby. It is a sustained daily practice. Saeed and Rizvi did not simply study or research when convenient. They built learning into the structure of their lives. Knowledge is a lever for impact. It's easy to say, "I will learn and lead," but harder to translate knowledge into systemic impact. Saeed's educational journals were not collections of ideas. They were tools for community transformation. Articles on nutrition, Eastern medicine, and social welfare were written so that teachers, students, and practitioners could apply insights immediately. Rizvi's surgical innovations were not confined to his own practice. Every new technique, every procedural improvement was standardized and taught so that hundreds of doctors could replicate it, expanding access to high-quality care nationwide. Just as Saeed multiplied his knowledge by creating platforms like Hamdard University and research centers, so too did Rizvi multiply his impact through SIUT's structured training programs and international partnerships. Knowledge without replication is vanity. Knowledge multiplied becomes influence, and influence multiplied becomes legacy. The leader who stops learning stops leading. Repetition is key here. The leader who stops learning stops leading. Saeed constantly sought new insights in medicine, philosophy, and education. He attended conferences, consulted global literature, and corresponded with scholars worldwide. He did not claim to know everything, and he embedded curiosity into every initiative he led. Rizvi, working in a resource-constrained environment, constantly looked for innovations that could improve outcomes. He collaborated with international experts, observed surgical breakthroughs, and adapted global practices to local realities. In essence, he demonstrated that learning is a discipline, not a luxury, and it is inseparable from leadership. You might think that knowledge is abstract or academic, but in reality, it is the engine of problem-solving, innovation, and credibility. Both men show us that leaders who stop expanding their understanding risk stagnation of themselves, their teams, and their institutions. Knowledge as strategy. What we need is not merely accumulation of facts, but strategic knowledge. Knowledge designed to produce measurable outcomes. Saeed leveraged his scholarly work to create tangible solutions. Hamdard's research in herbal medicines directly informed product development, improving health outcomes and sustaining the foundation financially. His writings were not ivory tower. They were practical, actionable, and financially sustaining. Rizvi used research to improve patient survival rates. His data-driven approach to transplant protocols and dialysis management saved thousands of lives. Knowledge was not theoretical. It was a tool for operational excellence. Hamdard University continues to educate leaders decades later. SIUT continues to produce world-class surgeons, pioneering procedures, and international partnerships. Knowledge created a ripple effect, not only on organizations, but on communities, nations, and global health standards. Real-world applications for leaders. How can you, in your personal or professional life, harness knowledge as power? There are concrete steps. Create a feedback loop. Constantly test your knowledge against results. Saeed tested medicinal theories against practical outcomes. Rizvi tested surgical innovations against patient survival. Knowledge is refined through action, document, and share. Knowledge becomes influence only when communicated. Write, teach, mentor, do not hoard insights, institutionalize learning. Formalize training programs, research initiatives, and standard operating procedures. The goal is to prevent knowledge from leaving when you absent bridge theory and practice. Knowledge without application is sterile. Saeed turned research into products and programs. Rizvi turned research into surgical protocols and training modules, collaborate globally. Exposure to diverse ideas accelerates innovation. Rizvi's international partnerships were crucial for elevating SIUT's standards. Saeed's global research network strengthened Hamdard's credibility. Knowledge as legacy. It's not about personal recognition. It's about building structures and ecosystems that outlive the individual. Saeed's 200 books, research initiatives, and university ensured that future leaders would continue his mission. Rizvi's research programs, surgical protocols, and trained cohorts ensured that SIUT's high standards would persist long after his personal involvement. Far from being mere scholarship, knowledge in their hands became a vehicle for scale, influence, and societal transformation. Knowledge created enduring institutions, elevated communities, and set benchmarks globally. Concluding thoughts. Knowledge is power, but only if it is pursued relentlessly, applied rigorously, and shared generously. Saeed and Rizvi demonstrate that the leader who stops learning stops leading. Knowledge is not just for personal growth. It is a multiplier of impact, a stabilizer for institutions, and a lifeline for the communities you serve. As we reflect on this lesson, remember, your vision, your institutions, your service, and your integrity are all amplified when anchored in knowledge. Chapter 8. Create systems that protect the weakest. Leadership is often measured by its impact on the strongest, profits, growth, accolades. But true greatness is measured by how you treat the weakest person in the room. This is not a sentimental statement. It is a practical, measurable principle of enduring leadership. Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi both understood this in concrete, operational terms. They did not simply preach care or compassion. They built systems that protected the most vulnerable, systematically, reliably, and with dignity. The philosophy behind systems. It's easy to say, I want to help the underprivileged, but harder to design an institutional structure that ensures help reaches them consistently. Hakeem Saeed's approach was multidimensional. He recognized that education, health, and economic opportunity were interlinked. In response, he founded Hamdard Village Schools, offering free, high-quality education to children from marginalized communities. These schools were not a temporary relief effort. They were permanent structures designed to uplift generations, fully integrated with Hamdard's broader social initiatives. Not only did Saeed focus on schooling, but he also created free clinics and community support networks, ensuring that education could not be interrupted by poor health or social instability. Hamdard's approach was systemic. Rather than treating problems piecemeal, he designed protective systems around vulnerable populations. Rizvi, in a different field, applied the same principle to healthcare. He designed SIUT as a complete continuum of patient care, ensuring that a patient's journey, from diagnosis to surgery to post-operative rehabilitation and lifelong medication, was seamless, dignified, and free of charge. His focus was not on individual heroics or celebrity surgeries, but on institutional reliability. Patients, often among the poorest in society, could rely on the hospital without fear, without delay, and without cost. Systems, not heroes. The real question is not whether a leader can act heroically, but whether a system can survive and serve after the leader is gone. Saeed did not rely on personal charisma to maintain his schools and clinics. He trained teachers, set curricula, and created administrative protocols to ensure continuity. Hamdard's programs could survive without him because they were embedded in a functioning framework. Rizvi did not rely on his own surgical skills alone. He implemented training programs for surgeons, standardized patient care protocols, and multi-tiered operational systems. By structuring SIUT around principles rather than individuals, he ensured that quality and accessibility were constant, even as staff changed over time. It's not that heroism is irrelevant, it's that systems scale impact far beyond individual capacity. One person can save dozens of lives, a well-designed system can save thousands. The weakest as the benchmark. Far from being merely a moral guideline, protecting the weakest serves as a strategic benchmark for institutional design. Saeed's village schools measured success not by enrollment numbers alone, but by student retention, learning outcomes, and long-term advancement. He constantly asked, "Are the children from the most disadvantaged families truly benefiting? Are we reaching the families others ignore?" This focus ensured that resources were allocated where the need was greatest, not where it was easiest or most visible. Rizvi applied the same principle in medicine. The SIUT model explicitly eliminated VIP culture, ensuring that every patient, regardless of social standing or connections, received equal care. He famously stated, "No patient will die because they cannot pay." His systems were designed to protect the most vulnerable, not reward the privileged. The lesson here is clear: whether in education, healthcare, or business, if the weakest person is protected, the system will function for everyone. If not, the system is fragile and inequitable. Concrete strategies for leaders. How can you apply this principle in your own work? There are actionable strategies that Saeed and Rizvi exemplify. Map the journey of the most vulnerable. Identify where breakdowns occur in your system, whether in education, healthcare, or operations. Design safeguards so that no one falls through the cracks. Embed redundancy and reliability. Saeed trained multiple teachers and administrators. Rizvi trained multiple doctors and nurses for every procedure. Systems must function even when individuals are unavailable or fail. Make equity measurable. Track outcomes specifically for those at the bottom, not averages for the overall group. Saeed monitored village student progress. Rizvi tracked survival and recovery rates among the poorest patients. Institutionalized dignity. It's not enough to provide access. Systems must treat people with respect. Rizvi ensured patients never felt inferior. Saeed ensured children from poor families could learn with pride. Iterate continuously. Both leaders improved their systems over decades. Saeed expanded schools and clinics in response to community needs. Rizvi upgraded surgical protocols, dialysis units, and transplant services as new methods emerged. Comparative insight. Notice the contrast. Saeed's emphasis was on education and community health, long-term societal upliftment. Rizvi's focus was on life-saving medical access and operational dignity, immediate survival and human rights. Yet the underlying principle was identical. Build systems that protect the weakest, and your institution will endure and thrive. You might think that systemic protection is only relevant for large organizations, but in reality, every leader can apply it in their teams, projects, or communities. Even in a small company, the weakest link, an undertrained employee, a vulnerable customer, becomes the true test of your leadership design. Systems as legacy. Creating systems for the weakest is not philanthropy, it is legacy engineering. Saeed's village schools, clinics, and Hamdard networks continue to function decades after his passing because they were designed to serve generations, not just the present moment. Rizvi's SIUT model continues to save thousands of lives annually, maintain international standards, and train new medical professionals. This is not coincidence. It is the result of rigorous, ethical, and compassionate system design. If we don't create protective systems, then we risk leaving institutions vulnerable to collapse, corruption, or neglect. If we do, then even the weakest person becomes a source of strength, resilience, and legitimacy for the entire organization. Concluding thoughts. Greatness is not about heroism or visibility. It is about structuring your vision so that it protects those most at risk consistently and reliably. Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Rizvi teach us that systems matter more than individual effort. Protection of the weakest is the ultimate benchmark, and legacy is built through operational discipline, not charisma alone. Chapter 9. Keep purpose alive through people, not personality. It's tempting to believe that greatness hinges on the charisma of a single leader. You've seen it in history. Figures so magnetic, so imposing, that institutions seem inseparable from them. But here is the truth Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi teach us. A mission dies in isolation. A mission lives through people. Leadership is not about being indispensable. Leadership is about building a network of capable, committed individuals who can carry the purpose forward, even when you are gone. This is the difference between fleeting fame and enduring legacy. The power of team-driven legacy. Hakeem Saeed understood this intuitively. He didn't simply create products, clinics, or schools. He empowered teams, scholars, volunteers, and youth organizations. Hamdard's operations were never dependent on a single person. From day one, Saeed fostered ownership, responsibility, and leadership at every level. For example, the Untold children's magazine, which inspired millions of children across Pakistan, was not a solo endeavor. Saeed mentored editors, writers, illustrators, and educators. He trained them to think independently, innovate, and uphold Hamdard's values. When he passed, these teams were equipped to continue the work, grow it, and maintain quality. Similarly, the Hamdard Foundation's schools and clinics were structured around dedicated staff who were empowered to make decisions, implement initiatives, and innovate locally. Saeed's genius lay not only in creating institutions, but in designing people networks that could breathe life into them indefinitely. Collaboration as a core principle. Rizvi's approach at SIUT mirrored this philosophy in a highly operational context. SIUT was never a hospital reliant on one surgeon, one administrator, or one visionary. Rizvi created a culture of collaboration, mutual accountability, and shared purpose. From nurses and technicians to surgeons and volunteers, every individual was taught, your role matters. Your decisions affect lives. Excellence is not optional. The open-door policy at SIUT reinforced this. Staff were not kept in rigid hierarchies. Instead, they were empowered to raise concerns, innovate, and take ownership. Even in high-pressure surgical scenarios, teams operated like a finely tuned orchestra, each member capable of taking initiative, each accountable for outcomes. This wasn't accidental. Rizvi knew that the moment an institution depends solely on personality, it becomes vulnerable. Staff might respect a leader, but if the system can't function independently, the mission collapses. Not popularity, but sustainability. The real question is not whether people like the leader. The real question is, can the organization thrive without that leader? Saeed faced the dual challenge of maintaining operations while also scaling programs nationwide. He solved this by delegating authority responsibly. Managers, educators, and community leaders were given autonomy, but within a framework of accountability and values. Popularity, charisma, or public recognition were irrelevant to sustaining impact. Rizvi's model at SIUT was even more operationally intense. Patient care, surgeries, and dialysis schedules demanded highly coordinated teamwork. Rizvi could not be everywhere, but the system was designed so that each individual's actions aligned with the hospital's core mission. No heroics were needed. Instead, consistency, reliability, and collective responsibility were the standards. It's easy to assume that charisma inspires loyalty, but harder to convert loyalty into operational excellence. That's where both Saeed and Rizvi excelled. They focused not on admiration, but on institutional and human capacity building. Strategies to keep purpose alive through people. What practical lessons can we draw for leaders, entrepreneurs, and changemakers? Train successors, not followers. Teach people to think independently, take initiative, and uphold the mission even in your absence. Saeed's youth mentorship programs and Rizvi's surgical training pipelines exemplify this. Empower accountability. Autonomy without accountability creates chaos. Both leaders emphasized systems where authority came with responsibility. Staff were trusted, but also measured foster shared purpose. People work hardest when they see themselves as part of something bigger than themselves. Both Hamdard and SIUT cultivated cultures where individual roles were meaningful, visible, and valued. Embed decision-making frameworks. Don't just delegate tasks, delegate judgment. Both leaders created structures that allowed team members to make critical decisions without constant supervision, ensuring speed and reliability. Celebrate contributions, not titles. Recognition in both Hamdard and SIUT was tied to results and commitment, not hierarchy or personality. This reinforced motivation and cultivated loyalty to the mission itself rather than to a single individual. Case study insights. Hamdard Foundation's continuity after Saeed's passing is instructive. Schools, clinics, and research centers continued expanding, not because of residual public memory, but because trained teams upheld his vision with discipline and integrity. SIUT operates the same way. Even with the passing of senior staff or shifts in external conditions, the hospital's ethos, processes, and culture allow it to maintain standards, innovate, and expand. This is the essence of sustainable leadership. The mission survives, thrives, and multiplies through people, not through personality. Personality is not unimportant. It attracts initial attention. But far from being the foundation, it is incidental. What matters is how the purpose is embedded in people, systems, and culture, reinforcing the principle. Just as Saeed empowered volunteers and educators to scale education, so too did Rizvi empower medical staff to scale healthcare. Both show that a mission cannot survive in isolation. A mission survives when it is carried by capable, trained, accountable people. Leadership is a multiplier, not a replacement. Every leader faces the inevitable reality: you cannot be everywhere, and you cannot do everything. The more important issue is how well your people are equipped to sustain the mission without you. Concluding thoughts. The key takeaway is clear. Impact is multiplied through people, not personality. Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Rizvi show that enduring change requires mentorship, accountability, shared purpose, and operational empowerment. If you want your mission to live beyond your tenure, invest in people who will carry your vision, refine it, and expand it. Chapter 10. Leave a legacy that forces others to rise. When we think of legacy, we often imagine monuments, names on buildings, or medals in showcases. But Hakeem Saeed and Dr. Adeebul Hasan Rizvi teach us a far more profound truth. Legacy is not what you leave behind for others to admire. It is what you leave behind that forces others to rise. This is the culmination of everything we've studied in the preceding chapters. Vision, institutions, service, compassion, resilience, integrity, knowledge, systems, and people. All of these converge into one ultimate principle. Your life should create a challenge for the next generation, compelling them to act, to innovate, to serve, and to surpass what you achieved. The power of challenge in legacy. Consider Hakeem Saeed. His assassination in 1998 shocked Pakistan. The nation mourned not just the man, but the ideals he represented. But far from ending his mission, this tragic event galvanized thousands of followers to step up. Schools, research centers, scholarships, and youth programs accelerated, fueled by a renewed sense of responsibility to carry forward his civilizational vision. Saeed's legacy was never about the man himself. It was about creating an infrastructure and a moral compass that demanded commitment from others. The Hamdard Foundation did not survive merely because of organizational structures. It survived because it forced future generations of educators, scientists, and philanthropists to rise to the level of his expectations. In parallel, Dr. Rizvi's lifelong dedication to SIUT demonstrates a living legacy in action. Decades of relentless work, 16 to 18-hour days, supervising surgeries, mentoring doctors, did not create followers dependent on his presence. Instead, it trained and inspired a generation of doctors, nurses, and administrators to uphold the principle that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. Rizvi's challenge is clear. If you claim to serve humanity, you must do so without expectation of fame or wealth, without compromise, and with the same discipline he demonstrated daily. His legacy is not simply a hospital. It is a demand that every medical professional rise to ethical, operational, and humanitarian excellence. Legacy as a challenge, not a comfort. It's easy to romanticize legacy as a reward. It is in reality a responsibility imposed on those who come after you. Saeed built moral education through scholarships, Nornhall Magazine, and Hamdard University. These were not just charitable acts, they were structural challenges. Can you continue this work? Can you uphold these standards? Can you innovate within these principles? Rizvi built moral healthcare through SIUT, transplantation programs, and nationwide dialysis networks. His legacy is a practical challenge, Will you provide care with dignity and without compromise, even when it's difficult? In both cases, the lesson is unmistakable. Legacy is not passive. Legacy is a test. Legacy is the bar you set that demands others to elevate themselves to a higher standard. The principle in action. So, how do you ensure your legacy forces others to rise? Let's break it down into actionable principles. Leave systems, not handouts. Saeed didn't merely donate. He built organizations that required responsibility, discipline, and moral engagement from others. Rizvi didn't simply perform surgeries. He created training systems and operational protocols that demanded excellence from his teams, set standards that cannot be ignored. Both leaders embodied personal standards, Saeed's rigor, Rizvi's integrity, that became the moral and operational minimum. If others wanted to participate, they had to meet or exceed these standards, create structures that reward initiative and punish complacency. Legacy is not comfortable. It tests commitment and capability. Hamdard's youth programs required active participation and contribution. SIUT's teams must continuously innovate patient care, embed purpose into every action. Legacy that forces others to rise is never accidental. Saeed and Rizvi wove their mission into every project, every institution, every interaction. The next generation cannot succeed unless they internalize the purpose, not just mimic the process, model the sacrifice required. You cannot leave a challenge you are unwilling to meet yourself. Saeed's decades of scholarship, product development, and public service, and Rizvi's 16 to 18-hour days in surgery and patient care demonstrate the personal commitment required to answer the call of their legacies. A comparative insight. No one can deny that both Saeed and Rizvi were exceptional individuals, but what's often overlooked is the strategic design of their legacies. Saeed's legacy built moral education, compelling young minds to grow, think critically, and serve their communities with knowledge and integrity. Rizvi's legacy built moral healthcare, compelling professionals to prioritize patient dignity, medical ethics, and operational excellence above personal gain. In both cases, the institutions themselves became instruments of elevation, forcing the next generation to rise or risk failing the mission. It's easy to say, I want to leave a legacy, but harder to design a legacy that compels action, discipline, and moral courage. The real question is not, what will people remember about me? The real question is, will the people I leave behind be elevated or diminished by my work? The ultimate takeaway. Just as we've seen in the previous chapters, vision outlives personality, institutions outlast popularity, service requires discipline, compassion is strategic, obstacles are opportunities, integrity sets the tone, knowledge empowers, systems protect the weak, and people multiply impact. Legacy is the final test of all these principles. If your vision dies with you, if your institutions crumble without your charisma, if your service is inconsistent, if your compassion is selective, if your people are untrained, then you have failed to leave a true legacy. True legacy is a challenge written into the world for others to answer. Your life, your work, your institutions. They should force those who come after to rise above mediocrity, to uphold values, and to advance the mission in ways even you could not accomplish alone. Closing thoughts. Hakeem Saeed's assassination and the subsequent acceleration of Hamdard's projects shows us that even in death, a leader can compel action. Rizvi's ongoing work demonstrates that even while living, a leader can inspire excellence without expecting reward or recognition. Your challenge as a leader, entrepreneur, or visionary is not to create comfort for followers. It is to create a mission, a standard, and a legacy that forces others to rise, to think bigger, act bolder, and serve humanity at a higher level. This is about more than personal achievement. It's about crafting a challenge that transcends your own lifetime, your own effort, your own ego. As we conclude this audiobook, remember, your legacy is not a gift. Your legacy is the challenge you leave behind, and how the next generation answers that challenge will define your true impact.